What's up, people? It is I, Atarai. In this long banger of a story we call The Land Chooses Its Heroes, Chapter 4, Part 12, The Planet Has Teeth, by Montsho Shelby. While it would be a lot easier if you just went back and listened to the last one, I will give you the 30-second recap. Arkin, Canydell, Elunei, Crieger find themselves ground zero of a magical catastrophe. Anytime something goes boom on this planet with a magical explosion, it's called a valve. The party don't know how, but they think that somehow the nameless faceless god has something to do with all these magical explosions, so they curious and they going out looking. In the very last story, they climbed down the ruins of the city that got earthquaked. They found a gigantic worm and fought some magical construction equipment, as one does. And right at the end of the last tale, some dude got pushed or fell into this magical crater of prismatic light. You all caught up. I'll see you at the end. Atarai. Oot! Did they push him, or did he jump? Arkin asked Elunei. They pushed him, the half-elven scout clarified. I should get back and tell the others. You okay to keep watch? Arkin asked. Elunei thought to snap back with a sly comment, but that was the first time Arkin spoke to her as if she were a part of the group and capable of doing what he did. Elunei merely nodded. The dog folks slipped back to the rest of the group to fill them in, and they all decided to move up and get a better vantage of what was happening. What do you think? Canydell asked the others for feedback.
Not sure, but my guess is a cult that worships the faceless god,
Ebo said. I don't think I can stand by and just let that happen. They're tossing people into a hole, said Canydell. I can't either, Arkin agreed. We don't know why they're doing it, said Crieger.
I don't give a good goddamn why they're doing it,
Arkin blurted. If you can at least look at this logically, said Crieger.
There are things I can let go and there are things I can't,
Arkin started to say. We put it to a vote then, Canydell said, just to cool everyone down.
My vote is we go over there and stop it,
said Ebo without need to add any caveat. You know mine and I know yours, Arkin said to Canydell. What about the rookie and the wizard? I think we should all at the very least see what they are doing before we intervene. We did come here to seek answers, and as gruesome as it may be, we may find ourselves learning something, said Crieger. The vote was already slanted to action over inaction, but it wasn't as if Elunei's voice didn't matter. In fact, the Olgar waited with bated breath to know where her heart lay on the subject. Elunei thought to tell them that she didn't want to intervene, but in traveling with this group of seekers, she was beginning to see the benefits of doing the right thing for its own sake. Sure, it wasn't always smart, and in the end, it didn't always reward you, but there was something to be said about being able to wake up every morning and know you were in the right that had its own measure of reward. If they're pushing people against their will, we should intervene, not that it should degenerate into a fight, said the half-elven woman.
They have triple our numbers, and I count at least 3 gunslinging seekers amongst them. So, at the very least, they have some competency as a unit, said Ebo.
You're mostly right, all except for the triple your numbers comment, came a voice from behind the group. Arkin dropped and rolled on his back, and when he flipped right-facing, he had 2 long-barreled pistols in either hand. There was a one-armed man in bone armor standing approximately 100 feet back. They could see the rest of his party of 4 behind him another 100 feet, as if they let him approach alone. Canydell took the lead in this conversation because he could sense that Arkin was too keyed up to speak to him without condescension or snark. This appeared quite clearly to be the leader of the group of seekers that they fought on the road for reasons they did not completely understand. Speak your peace, Seeker, said Canydell. The one-armed man held his arm behind his back in a resting position. We may have gotten off on the wrong foot, but I feel as if we can remedy that now, said the one-armed seeker.
The wrong foot is insulting someone's shoes, maybe even calling their horse fat, not slinging spells at them,
Arkin said from the ground, his dual pistols still trained on his target.
If I were to ask, what exactly do you want to do and why?
Asked Ebo. Help you out, of course. As I said, we got off on the wrong foot. You came at us like you meant to do us harm, aggressively, threatening. I suppose we have a shoot-first sort of philosophy, said the one-armed seeker. Arkin scoffed. Getting nearly roasted alive was hardly grounds for joking around. Elunei eyed the warrior woman that nearly killed her in their last encounter. She held back her trepidation. The rookie adventurer was mildly intimidated, but she didn't let it show on her face. We didn't get the full details, but we are under the impression that your group handles problems harshly, Canydell added. Is that what he told you? Said the one-armed seeker, pointing to Crieger. Both sides left things unsaid because it was clear that he did. If we were to go over there and talk to those people, would your old group at least give them the benefit of the doubt if they attempted to parley? Said Canydell to Crieger. I believe they're capable of it, but are you? Crieger questioned. Canydell nodded, seeing that it did seem as if they didn't intend on handling things diplomatically when they spoke on the subject last. We should approach quickly, in force, but attempt to discern their motivations, and then, and only then, we should act, said Crieger. Canydell looked to his core group for signs of objection, and after finding none, he agreed. In the world of Seekers, it wasn't unheard of for impromptu alliances to well up. Sometimes having just enough common ground was enough to bond two groups into one to stand against a group they had none with. In the cases of new valves, it was the time of the greatest contention.
They were still outnumbered 2-1, but they put their faith in their own abilities to fight their way out of a numerical disadvantage. When the group approached the camp of new seekers, they tensed up at their appearance. There were approximately 30 people forced onto the ground into seated positions. Other seekers, more than likely, or perhaps merchants that used to live in Goloste that came back to their city in shambles. Why they were there was unclear, but standing approximately 10 to 15 feet from the ledge of this massively huge and undoubtedly bright chasm of prismatic colors was a woman in white. She was darker of skin and had wild, windswept hair that rose and fell of its own accord. Her ears pointed, her shape lithe, clearly feminine under those loose-fitting robes. Arkin clocked the 3 gunslinger seekers first because it would be on him to deal with them before they caused them major damage from unexpected shooting angles. It was subtle, but it was clear that all those in standing positions had chaotic swirling energies in their eyes, the same as Chaos Elves, which was not typical to most unless they were half Chaos Elves, though all signs pointed to them all being made up of random heritages. An ogre with a vortex of a black swirling iris and a white one stepped in front of the party before they got into arm's reach, along with a Goliath female with red and green eyes that waxed and waned with brightness the same as the tide. Canydell took the hint and stopped 3 paces before he moved into their space. We saw you push someone into the pit there. We came to find out why, said Canydell. The woman in authority didn't step close to the group, and whenever it seemed as if their party shifted positions to gain an advantage, their acolytes countermoved to slow them down from having a straight path to reach anyone without having to step over hostages to do it. The woman in white robes was obviously a Chaos Elf, elves born near the vicinity of valves or high magic. Their bodies tended to flow with the strands of the weave of magic, collecting it in their very blood. She looked at this combined group of seekers, and though she was defensive, she gave them some manner of respect for the apparent likelihood they sought the wisdom of the nameless, if nothing else.
Yes, we did. It was the will of the nameless one. If we wish to ascend, then we must be willing to sacrifice. We must be willing to feed our God so that he bestows us power. Witness the power of the God without name, said the Chaos Elf.
The woman pointed at one of the unfortunate examples that were those on the ground. and a human with swirling red eyes plucked a woman out of the mob like a lamb to slaughter. Canydell, Arkin, and Ebo tensed. It was a subtle gesture of concern that Crieger noticed. The wild mage touched Canydell's shoulder to remind him the numerical disadvantage they found themselves in. The elven speaker grabbed the woman by the elbow when she was presented. She resisted weakly, but it was clear the woman was untrained and not capable of effectively stopping them. The man at the Chaos Elf's side grabbed her by both arms from behind and overpowered her.
"Witness the power of the faceless god,"
she said as her companion walked the woman to the lights of the huge prismatic crater.
"If you wanted the power of the faceless god, why not you go down there and get it for your damn self?"
Arkin said, brushing away the material around his black duster to reveal his pistols and give him quicker access to them. The dogfolk could see out of the corner of his eye the 3 gunslinging seekers posturing up to do the same.
"Because we give, he gives back. We are the closest we have ever been to our Lord. You shall see,"
said the elf woman as if she was certain. "So this doesn't escalate into something it doesn't have to. Why don't you explain what it is we are to see before you go through with whatever it is you seem to think will happen when you toss her into that massive crater," said Crieger. The woman stopped her partner from moving forward with an outstretched hand. She seemed not to be as oblivious to the volatile situation that was in front of her as it at first appeared.
"We have been here for weeks before the eruption. We were miners from Junction. Several of our people were consumed in the destruction when we tapped into this vein. And when that glorious eruption of power washed over us, we were forever changed. We heard the voice of the faceless. Each soul that crater consumed is yet another log in its ever-burning fire, and it will bathe us with its warmth," she said.
"All I'm hearing is that your digging made this eruption and killed quite a lot of people, so if that is truly the voice of the faceless god, fuck 'em," said Arkin.
"It takes courage to be cruel, especially when it isn't your nature, but trust me, you will be reborn when you bathe in its light."
The woman nodded, and with that slight gesture, the waiting acolyte flung the woman off the side of the deep chasm. The fuse was lit, and everything happened in one chaotic mess of action. Ebo, Canydell, and Arkin moved in complete concert. By their very nature, each man knew the other's heart. Their conscience would not allow an innocent person to be killed for any reason, even if it was in service to the god they in fact revered. Canydell quickly pushed a duplicate of himself up towards where the woman was pushed. He instantly swapped places with his doppelganger and made a desperate grab for the woman that had been dropped. Arkin didn't hesitate in the slightest degree when it was clear this conflict wasn't going to be settled with spirited theological discourse on the nuances of the faceless god. The dogfolk gunslinger's hand moved in an absolute blur. He fired 1 shot, 2 shot, 3 shot, and in that blink of an eye, all 3 opposing gunslingers' heads snapped, and blood sprayed from the exit wound of his bullets. They had all reached, but yet none of them were fast enough to do a damn thing about it. Ebo cast a spell at the nearest goon in his general vicinity, and Elunei fired her bow liberally. Crieger's old group joined in, seeing the carnage. Crieger casted a spell at the acolyte closest to the prismatic drop, and a raging miniature wave roared to life and slammed into him, sending him over the sides. Even though outnumbered with the combined power of 2 groups of seekers, they were a bit more evenly matched. Canydell pulled the civilian from the ledge and found himself directly in the Chaos Elf's path. Canydell drew his sword quickly and advanced on her before she more than likely would cast a spell, which 95% of Chaos Elves were naturally inclined to. Ebo protected the crowd of civilians with a gust of wind, even though every time he called to the nameless god for power, he had to beware of the magical backlashes of the valve itself, not to mention his own brand of chaos. Crieger's tidal wave leveled the man who stood next to the Chaos Elf, and he flew into the unknown of the immense crater.
He felt the awesome tingle of magic after the wave knocked in one victim. The spell, as intended, should have faded after the majestic wave crested and fell, but it lingered and rolled back from the ledge like mercury inside of a thermometer. The living wave didn't stop at the victim. It rolled into a ball and attempted to bowl over the chaos elf in white. The woman hit the dirt, laid flat, and the roaring element of water bounced over her head. The other cultists of the Faceless had too many problems of their own to react to the perils of their speaker, and what started with unity ended with every man for himself. Crieger, ever the sage, watched as the man he knocked into the chasm met his end. He was not close enough to see his ultimate fate, but he heard the sound of a muffled scream silenced. A small but physical rush of energy radiated out of the crater. Crieger could feel it. After years of searching, he finally felt the touch of the nameless god. Unlike that of typical seekers, he only sought the faceless one for the sake of knowing magic, not attempting to understand the ways of vapid gods. His gnarled and torn face found a smile. He had found a joy inside of him that he hadn't felt in years. Crieger commanded the now living tidal wave into the crowd of bystanders. The water rose high over heads and crashed down, breaking what it didn't sweep away. Canydell and his crew watched in abject horror. Even those seekers that ventured with Crieger turned up an honest, confused eyebrow.
"Get your beast under control!"
yelled Ebo to Crieger. Arkin rolled under wild slashes and flipped towards people who were at the mercy of the sentient wave of water. Some of the hostages tumbled down to their deaths, and Crieger's look of elation did little to exonerate him from the notion he lost control. Canydell felt the wave overtake him the moment those people went into the chasm. With every soul that fell to the prismatic fire, a chaotic burst of magical energy washed over them. Ebo dove for the side of the crater to catch whoever he could. "Do what you can," Canydell yelled to his dwarven brother-at-arms as a version of himself appeared next to him and dove off the side of the cliff.
"What are you doing, Crieger?"
said the one-armed man. The wild mage's smile didn't relent. He looked at his former traveling companions as if he owed them at least the slightest bit of explanation. "This is what I came to Everin for. I have never been a part of your backwater prime world. Have you ever wondered why so many gods live in Everin? Of course you haven't. You've never lived in any other dimension but this one. The answers you seek were out of your perception of reality." Crieger's shoulder jutted back violently as a bullet hit him, nearly spinning him around. The wild mage saw Arkin diving towards cover as he executed his shot. Crieger theatrically traced runes on open air, and a swirling black ball of nothingness the size of his entire body manifested into reality. It spun with the intensity of a black marble, and he pushed it out with two hands. The orb bounced like a boulder that had found an incline. Those that hadn't fled, and the wave hadn't carried away, rolled to evade the spear of utter annihilation. Those poor souls, too slow to dive out of its path, were erased from existence. Whatever the void touched disappeared, and whatever it didn't flopped onto the dirt. The one-armed seeker was the first to be struck by the unrelenting orb. There was a deep sizzle, then he was gone as if he never were. It swallowed the champion in the spiked armor with the maul. Arkin and the Chaos Elf that once challenged Elunei rolled off to the sides nimbly. The dog folk's escape was so narrow that the haunting blackness tore away pieces of his duster. Canydell quickly felt his body coming undone the closer he had gotten to the prismatic furnace that threatened to reforge his body into energy. He glanced back and could see a shadow self in sight, along with Ebo, who was burdened with the impossible task of do something useful, then given seconds to make it happen. Canydell didn't quite know what he intended to do when he dove down, but for reasons that he couldn't quite explain, he felt as if he knew he could help. The closer he was to the crater, the more power he felt, and at this current moment, he felt the unbridled power he had when he was a child. A vast reservoir of magic with no clear knowledge or direction. People free fell into the warmth of annihilation. Typically, Canydell's duplicate was one at a time and he could switch places with the afterimage. He didn't have a way to bring anyone else with him. Not typically. When he was a child, he had a limitless well of power that flowed through him and now felt much like then. Canydell didn't know why he could, but he knew that he could manipulate the weave of magic with only the power of his will. The former blacksmith cut through the air in his reckless dive, grabbed two people by the waist and teleported them to the waiting arms of his double that watched from the ledge. People vanished into prismatic light. Canydell knew he couldn't save them all, but he could save who he could. Crieger's orb of energy spun and twisted to his will. The wild mage seemed to revel in the killing, as if each soul he took added to his own power, elevating him higher, cresting closer and closer to the realm of godhood. The assembled cultists and the victims fled as well as they could, while Crieger reaped the living with unbridled joy. The ground rumbled as if the power of the well was unstable, agitated, or perhaps excited by the unpredictable surges of magical power. Arkin and Elunei slammed their backs up behind a heavy boulder as a black ball of entropy rolled about with the same intensity as a fateful hound.
"I'm gonna take shots, you slip around," said the dogfolk gunslinger.
The half-elf woman nodded, stowing away the fear that welled inside of her. Arkin hopped from cover and yelled to Crieger to ensure his focus was on him.
"Hey, Psycho,"
said Arkin before letting loose a barrage of shots. Crieger, being an excellent battle mage, didn't flinch in the face of danger and reflexively cast a spell that erupted a translucent shield in front of his person. The bit bounced off of nothing. The magical force rippled on the air, given new form by the power of the wild magic. A shimmer of the shield manifested an oversized mirror of Crieger's gnarled hand, as if his simple spell was given a life of its own, independent of the man who cast it, but alive enough to have its own autonomy. When Crieger's attention was drawn to Arkin, Elunei loosed an arrow. The projectile soared for the back of Crieger's head, but the hand of force snatched the arrow out of the air.
"These men were your friends, you psychopath!"
yelled Arkin, diving to the dirt as his orb of annihilation hopped and landed where he had just been. "Friends? I came to your shitty prime world to attain godhood, not to make friends," said Crieger. The woman with the wild eyes that nearly killed Elunei the day before looked to the half-elven scout and nodded slyly to her. Elunei covered her while she moved in, firing rapid shots over her shoulder. The wild-eyed woman brandished her double hand axes and hopped into the air ready to slam down and end this raving madman. Crieger spit forth a gout of flame that didn't just burn, but roasted the woman who was his former companion alive. Her screams created a distant echo and faded quickly because there wasn't enough of her left to complete it. Ebo rolled away from the ledge of the crater when he could no longer see Canydell. The situation was so dire he didn't even have time to grieve. He called to the Nameless One for a spell, and cracking through the huge high rock ceiling came a brilliant pillar of fire, stronger than any he had ever summoned. The orange pillar slammed down from the heavens with the destructive force of a volcano. The shimmering, formless monster that protected Crieger stuck out his chest to intercept the divine blast. It somewhat took on the visage of a living being. Even though it fought to defend its master with an instinctual rage, the devastation of the fire melted it, sending it back to the nothingness it was born. When Crieger saw his defense cracking away like glass, he took a leaping dive to his side, narrowly missing being burned alive. The sentient tidal wave rolled back to its original caster, putting out some of the divine fire, turning it into steam. You people don't understand. True strength lies in magic. No one on this planet was ever meant to accept its gifts, this wellspring of infinity. Crieger spouted words as if drunk from the sudden infusion of Everin's power.
He cast a spell, and a massive disembodied hand appeared from the bowels of the prismatic crater. Ebo had seen that spell before. Bigsby's hand was an enormous hand that flowed on air that could strike or defend for the wizard by way of their will. The difference between this casting of the spell and any other was that in this case, it didn't stop with just a single appendage. The enormous hand rose from the light of the energy well, followed by a massive arm, then torso and head. In seconds, a prismatic titan emerged, taking a huge step out of the seemingly bottomless pit. Arkin, Ebo, and Elunei watched in horror and awe as the massive foot crested over the ledge. If the engine that feeds Everin is souls, I shall deliver it by the thousands, said Crieger while pointing at whoever was left. As the heart-like titan bounded for Ebo and rose his foot, Canydell appeared on top of it, plunging his sword downward into the beast's toe. The massive foot veered off course, slamming down next to the dwarf instead of on him. The titan crouched down, dealing with this minor irritation. Arkin didn't want to lose the momentum due to fear. He let off shots at the empowered wild mage, figuring that he wouldn't be able to block them all. Elunei, for as much as she didn't want to admit it, was new to an adventurer's life. When the other three saw impossible odds, they shrugged, put their heads down, and kept swinging until they were the last ones standing. The half-elven scout was starting to understand what it meant to be an adventurer. Death was a constant looming fear, a nagging voice that one had to ignore, along with common sense. In no uncertain terms, if any of her companions fell or fled, she was prepared to bolt. She fired arrows into Crieger with the same hopeful optimism as Arkin. Ebo rolled away, yet thought Canydell dead. The ground rumbled angrily. The prismatic titan crashed down with his massive hand and slammed Canydell, who clung to his toe. When he moved his hand away, Ebo, as well as the titan, expected to see a sticky red paste, but there was nothing. Suddenly, Canydell emerged over the titan's head, cutting his eye. In the same instant, his other foot, and one of its hands, and on its back. Each version of Canydell was as viable as the other, striking, disappearing, repositioning. Crieger smiled, then yelled at the top of his lungs so that all of Canydell could hear. This was the power you should have had all along. When I chose to travel with this group, it was you I most wanted to understand. You're finally starting to realize magic is salvation. It is unlimited potential. It is the power to make the universe and elevate yourself into a god. When I give you back to the planet, I will take your power of making, said Crieger to the 15 different instances of Canydell fighting a monster made manifest by the power of the Nameless One. All of Canydell's instances looked to Crieger, all of which were fragments of himself. The ex-blacksmith had to admit that he felt the power of creation pulsating inside of him. But it didn't feel like something outside of himself that he drew into himself, but a power that was always inside of him that was reawakened. I cannot claim to know why I have this power, but I do know why you shouldn't. Canydell and all his instances spoke back in complete unison. Crieger began to cast a spell. He tapped into the weave of magic which was virtually vibrating with the unfiltered power of creation. As he moved his hands, the cracks in the ceiling that shone with random shards of light grew brighter. He commanded the heavens to open up and destroy anything that stood in opposition to him. Before he got out the final word of his arcane spell, the ground erupted in violence, and a worm that rivaled that of the Titan itself swallowed the mage whole. Crieger disappeared in the maw of the massive beast. The ground broke away, and the already unstable cavern shifted with the power of the thunderous worm. Walls fell. The crater widened. The prismatic light that welled up from below intensified. The party and all those that stood struggled to stay on their feet.
The titan that all of Canydell swarmed stumbled and fell back into the primordial light of creation that birthed them. Canydell and all of his growing instances flickered in and out of existence, ever shifting as if they were every place and any place at once. Arkin looked to Ebo as they were pulled into the massive rock slide, in those seconds conveying a thankfulness for the friendship they shared. Now that this was the end, the worm rose high, then arced back down, creating even more destruction. Canydell closed his eyes, not knowing how, but knowing that he could. Instances of himself appeared next to all the survivors, all pieces of his person. The instances began to appear up higher in the air towards the collapsing stone. Canydell held on to everyone. All instances of himself and every person who still drew breath flickered out of existence like fireflies, then appeared higher up with different instances of Canydell. The flickering lasted for fractions of seconds, but in that time all those left appeared and disappeared until the instances of Canydell placed them all on higher ground. Moments later, the prismatic crater, along with all passages, man-made tunnels, and everything below, crumbled in on itself until it was merely dirt once again. All the survivors looked to each other, and all instances of Canydell but one winked out of existence. Arkin smiled joyously, spun two of his shooting irons on his fingers, and fired them in the air.
"That's how it's done!"
The dogfolk yelled with triumphant exuberance. Some of the random survivors wandered away, while others talked amongst themselves to ponder. Ebo walked over to all of his friends and crunched them into a bear hug.
"How did you do that?"
Ebo asked after they shared in a moment of excitement to be alive. Canydell smiled with the sun shining down on him a bit more brightly. "I don't know. In that moment, I just knew I could. I felt the nameless one, and I commanded the worm, then I did what I did. When I was in the pit, it felt as if I was returning home somehow," said Canydell.
"So are you saying it chose you then?" asked Arkin.
"I wouldn't say that," Canydell said humbly.
"Well, I can and I will,"
Arkin replied.
"So you don't know what happened? But I know somehow you had godlike power inside of you. I think we all know what that means,"
said Ebo. Arkin smiled, nodded, and put his hand out. Ebo nodded knowingly and put his hand out, then looked to Canydell. Canydell took a moment. He knew exactly what it was Ebo needed to hear, but for a split second he wasn't sure if he was ready to say it. The blacksmith nodded and smiled in turn, then put his hand in, declaring what they were all thinking. "We seek." Elunei stood over to the side. Though she was thrilled to be alive, she didn't know if she was intruding in those three's private moment. Arkin lit a cigarette and stared at Elunei. "You're not with us, rookie?" Elunei for once allowed that slight to pass. "If I could have ran, I might have. This may not be the life for me," she said. "But you didn't run," said Arkin.
"We do this with very little knowledge of our future,"
said Ebo. "Fighting random madmen bent on achieving godhood by any means," Canydell added with enthusiasm. Elunei folded her arms and turned her back, as if in thought. "And pick up a little coin here and there, if we can manage it," Arkin finished. Elunei whirled back around and put her hand in, joining their covenant. "How could I refuse?" said the half-elf woman with a beaming smile. "Yeah, but will they even remember me? I mean, the story's been going on for I don't know how long, man. And it's just now, Atarai gets emotional at the end of things, you know what I'm saying? I mean, who will remember the dogman gunslinger when he's gone? Who will remember the magic blacksmith man Canydell? Will the planet of Everin still be alive?
when the story's over?
I'm tempted to make some shit up right now so it ain't gotta end, people.
Sir, the other passengers are getting concerned. You've been talking to yourself for 3 minutes. Please stop or I'm gonna have to eject you from the train, sir.
Adderite just wrapping up, you know? I mean, I'm on this train to Vancouver, you know, at the God of Games. You know, he don't like always teleporting places. I mean, that shit costs money. Sometime you want to see the sights, man. Just let me do my thing, Mr. Train Man. I need you to remember us. Don't forget it. Whatever you do. Because you're gonna regret it. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someday you will regret it. This is the last story with those adventurers in it. And I just can't. I gotta go. Just like and subscribe, man, so we can make more of these one day. I mean, we need to come back. Don't let it end like this. That's it. I'm renaming this channel to Arcade of Adderite. That's it. No, that's not true. I didn't clear that. Peace out.